This is Jay Martin.
All right, welcome to the Jay Martin Show, and I'm joined once again by Hugues Jacqemin, CEO of Northern Graphite. Hugues, it's great to have you back on the program. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm excited to jump in because we've had you on the program many times, actually, Northern Graphite now, 4 or 5 times on the show. My audience is super familiar. I still want to step back and give a bit of a high-level overview of what it is that you're building and why, and get, as you call it, the three-legged stool model that you're building at Northern Graphite, creating a true mine-to-market graphite company, presently the only North American producer of graphite and the third largest non-Chinese producer of graphite, which brings me to a comment that you said right before I hit record, and we were going through some of the recent events that you put out news about, and you said, look, Jay, what we're doing here is we're trying to build a whole new industry, because this is one that has historically been completely located in China, and we're now building this in North America. And so could you elaborate on that statement for me a little bit and just speak to the significance of creating an industry that presently doesn't exist, but is very much needed, especially now. And then we'll get into Northern Graphite's role in that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking the question. It's very interesting, but up to, a few years ago, most of the graphite that's being sold in the world was mined and processed in China. And so, as the graphite becomes a very critical mineral for the electrification of the world, it's very important for us to be able to build this supply chain outside of China. And our goal is to do that. So, a three-legged stool we always talk about is, first of all, the mining. We got to have enough capacity of graphite that we can mine over the next 10 to 20 years so that we can supply the market. And with the assets that we've acquired over the last few months, we now have about 300,000 tons of annual production capacity of graphite between Canada and Namibia. And therefore, we're now in a position to bring that graphite to the market in North America and Europe. And that's the first leg of our stool. The second leg of our stool is we had to be able to create the transformation of the graphite that we produce in our mines into a material that can be used in a lithium-ion battery in the anode. And in order to do that, we have basically selected a site in northern Quebec, in Baie-Comeau, that we want to build so as to become, one of the largest producing site of anode material in the world. And that site will be able to take our 300,000 tons of graphite and transform it into 200,000 tons of anode material. And we're doing that with partners who are currently producing anode material, and they're bringing the technology to us and venturing with us in building the capacity that we need in order to be able to supply the battery industry in North America and Europe. And then the third leg of our stool is really about moving downstream and taking the graphite that we produce in our mines and functionalizing that graphite in order to be able to meet the demand for all the other applications that are adjacent to the lithium-ion battery. And there we talk about the electronics industry, we talk about the construction industry, we talk about a whole load of different types of applications that require further functionalizing of the graphite that we produce in our mine and producing products that can then be used to create value for our customers and our shareholders outside of the industry, but adjacent to it.
And that's the third leg, and maybe the leg that we should talk about, because when we talk about graphite, we often go directly to anode and lithium-ion batteries. And I want to spend a minute on that as well, because it is significant, and achieving 200,000 tons of anode material is massive on continent. With your recent acquisition of Neograph, this is your third leg, which I guess gives you the ability to contribute to all the, as you said, the parallel products, right? Non-battery related graphite demand. And your acquisition of Neograph, it's a 140-year-old company, over 100 employees. The headquarters is something like 400,000 square feet, 22 acres, where they're a materials science company, right? And they're servicing their blue chip companies who have all these specialty needs for graphite products. And so if I've got it correct, you purchased what is a controlling interest and that you have over 50% voting interest and then a 33% equity interest. Is this correct?
That's correct, yes. Neograph, has been a customer of ours for over 30 years, and so we know them very well. They have been using our graphite from Lactazil for a long time. And what they're able to do is they're able to take that graphite and then they can functionalize it for a whole loads of different applications. They actually have, more than 2,000 SKUs that they produce from the graphite that we sell them and provide them out of Lactazil. And what they do is they're able to intercalate the graphite, they're able to expand the graphite, to mill it, and turn it into foils and graphene type applications. And by doing so, they can bring the full power of what graphite can do in the marketplace. And if you look at graphite, it's really a metal replacement type of application. Basically, the main competitor would be copper, and graphite provides the same level of conductivity, but is 5 times lighter than copper. And so when you look at, for example, the electronics industry and cell phones, for example, these units have a battery in them, and what they do is they generate quite a lot of heat. And what Neograph does, for example, is they're able to produce a foil using our graphite flakes that would enable to manage the thermal issues that these units may have. And what they do is the foil basically will help dissipate the heat within the electronics and will allow for the performance of the unit to be much higher than what you would normally have if you didn't have the graphite foil or if you used, other types of metal to dissipate that heat. At the same time, they're also able to put this graphite material, once it's being functionalized, into other materials, composite materials. And for example, what they can do is they can improve the insulating properties of foam, or they can provide for fire prevention, or allow for materials to resist the extreme heat of a fire for a longer period of time, which would enable the issues of fire to be managed in a much more safe and proactive way. So, the Neograph deal for us is very interesting because it takes us really into what we would call material science. And so by having Neograph on board and being able to work much closely with them, we can help them grow their applications much faster, and we can make sure that with our graphite production in North America and Namibia and the combination of Neograph, we can also cater for a whole load of application outside of the battery field, but adjacent to it, because a lot of those applications, for example, when we talk about thermal management and fire prevention, that also applies to lithium-ion batteries. So they're growing very fast even in that segment today. And there are a lot of synergies to be gained from that. And so if we want to be viewed as the leading mining and processing company within the graphite industry, having the ability to cater for all these different types of application and having the science to be able to do that, and all the intellectual property that goes with it is very important for us. So that acquisition is something we've been working on for a long time. And we're very pleased that, we've been able to partner with Edgewater. They did the acquisition, and then we came on the back end of it and have the ability to acquire, 33% financial interest and 51% controlling interest. And we'll be working with them to develop that company. And it's only the first step, because there are many other things we can do in that space, and having the base with Neograph allows us to then further expand in that field and maybe look at doing further deals down the road.
And I like that it gives you a presence in the United States as well, because your projects right now are in Namibia and Quebec, great mining jurisdictions, and very important that one of them is in North America. Neograph's based in Ohio. And as you said, 2,000 SKUs, something like 150 patents. So what does expansion look like then? And I know you have the option to acquire, I believe you have the option to acquire 100% down the road, should you choose to option that. But what does expansion look like? If this is step one, you know, what does expansion, what's step two? What could we look forward to?
Well, we can look at, you know, where the company is growing, and as we require more resources and more assets, we could look at acquiring other companies in the space that could basically be added on to what we have with Neograph. So for me, you know, it's a little bit like the Imerys acquisition or the Bacomo site and the partnerships that we have with the battery anode material guy. It gives us a platform that we can develop. And, you know, I think it will give us a lot of opportunity to look at additional assets that would be complementary to what Neograph is doing today, so that we can continue to grow in the space. And, you know, most of that today is coming from China. So having the ability to develop that supply chain in North America and in the US in particular, and the ability to also service markets outside of the US, such as Europe or even some of the Asian countries outside of China, it gives us a great opportunity to look at the additional assets that we could add on to the Neograph acquisition moving forward.
That makes sense. And, you know, it's sort of first mover advantage right now, right? Like you're moving quickly. Northern Graphite's moving very fast. And it strikes me as super significant given how we open this conversation with, we're not building a company, like we're essentially building a new industry here in North America when it comes to the graphite space. And so I'm seeing a peak in investor interest specifically towards graphite right now. Therefore, I'm seeing the emergence of more companies, right? Supply will always meet demand. So talk to me about investor sentiment right now. I know you've been on the road a ton. You were at my show in Vancouver in January. Then you were off to Indaba. I know then you stopped off in Namibia to check on your projects, but, you know, what are you seeing from an investor's sentiment standpoint today? Because you've been doing this a long time, so you've seen the cycles come and go. How does sentiment today relate to, you know, the previous 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, I've been in this industry since 2014. So as you said, you know, I've seen a lot of different cycles and a lot of different situations. I think what's quite exciting for me is really around the timing. You know, it really never has been as fertile for graphite as it has been over the last 12 months. And that's because, you know, both North America and US in particular, as well as Europe, have really decided that they need their own supply chain of graphite in order to develop their lithium-ion battery industry and their electric vehicle industry. And, you know, what we are trying to do at Northern Graphite is to position ourselves by, you know, adding all the building blocks that we need to create a very strong, stable, cash flow generating company in the graphite space with all the resources that we need in order to be able to execute on our plans. And, you know, I've said this from the beginning, one thing is to have the right strategy, another thing is to have the right assets, but, you know, where the rubber hits the road is really in the execution of the strategy itself. And in order to execute, you need technology and you need people. And, you know, what we have been able to do through the acquisitions that we're doing is really add, you know, a large group of very experienced people in the space, and given them the tools and the IP that they need to be able to have a very broad presence in the marketplace. So when we talk about Northern Graphite, we are now, you know, a very let's say, a great platform to then be able to develop the supply chain out of China and really become the leading company in the space, which has always been our goal. And if you think about it, you know, the speed at which we're doing this is really quite incredible, because, you know, back in April, we were still developing one asset in Ontario called Bissett Creek. And today, you know, we have 4 on the mining side that we're developing. And then at the same time, you know, we're doing the anode material plant in Baie-Comeau, and we're doing this acquisition with Neograph. And all of that has happened in the space of a few months. And so now that we have, you know, the base, and now that we have a platform that we can grow on, and the talent that we need, and the technology that we need, we can then execute. And I think we can do that, you know, very quickly. And that will enable us to attract investors in the space, because there's a lot more investment that will need to happen. And when you talk about, you know, what's happening with investors around the world, and as you said, you know, I've traveled between Canada, South Africa, Europe, quite a bit over the last few months. And, you know, what investors want is they want to see us, you know, making deals with customers and creating, you know, demand for the products that we will be able to produce. And so for me, you know, the next stage of what we need to do is to take all of what we've assembled and really get customers on board who will be able to commit to taking volumes of productions for us that will allow us to then attract investors into our company, so that we can grow this as quickly as we can. But the environment is extremely fertile, and when you talk to people about what we're doing, you know, everybody's getting very excited. Of course, there's a lot of questions in terms of, well, where are you going to find all the money that you need to do this, and how are you going to be able to convince the OEMs and the off-takers to work with you? And those are all very good questions. And I think the answer to that is, you know, one step at a time. I always say, you know, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. So by building this platform, we are now able today to provide customers with products and to demonstrate that we have the technology and we have the know-how to be able to service their needs. And we can do that in relatively small quantities, because we are producing graphite today. We have partners who are able to turn that graphite into anode material today, and we have Neograph who can provide them with the type of products that they need. So we can approach, you know, customers with a full portfolio of products today that they can test, that they can qualify. And of course, you know, we're not talking about pilots. We're talking about, you know, large-scale production facilities, and that will give them the confidence to commit to us in the future. And that's what we need to do. You know, we need to approach them with these products. We have to get our products qualified, tested, and as we do that, we have to get them on board so that we can get the offtakes that we need to be able to raise the money with the governments, with the banking institutions, as well as the investors, to be able to ramp up the capacity one step at a time. Because, you know, demand for graphite is going to be very strong, but nobody really needs a lot of anode material today in North America, because the factories are not built yet. They're coming down the pipeline. They'll be operating mostly around 2026. So we have a 2 to 3 year window to really get ourselves into the market. And, you know, being a producer of graphite products today from the mine to the market will allow us to generate cash flow that will allow us to pay for all the resources that we have. And then one step by step, we can build the relationships and start building the demand for the products that we have. So I think we're in a very, very good position. You know, we used to be trailing at the back of the queue, developing one asset, and we are now completely in the front of the queue with assets that are producing and technology that can be implemented today. And so I think, you know, things can really start to accelerate for us. And the investor community, I am sure, will value that, and I think it will really help us as we create more and more value in the marketplace, and as we talk to our investors on a global basis.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And you know, I like that outlook when you talk about the production capacity coming in 2026. You know, so in a sense, you're early, right? You could say you're early here. And what I always talk about on my channel is our job as retail investors, you know, is to spot the avalanche and get ourselves in front of it, you know, and if you can do that effectively when it comes to the flow of capital, you can make yourself a lot of money. And it's very similar to how you're positioning Northern Graphite right now. You're ahead of the avalanche. We have a lot of confidence the avalanche is coming, right? And the, you know, the acquisition of Neograph gives you security in the end user, but also gives them security of the supply, right? Which is just as important for that whole chain to work well, to get confidence to the institutional investors, whoever you're talking to, right? You're going to want to see that whole supply chain secure in some way. And so, look, I think it's a really exciting time to be looking at the graphite space, because we don't often, as retail investors, get the opportunity to bet on a budding industry the way we have right now. You know, the demand for graphite is very mature, but the industry is suddenly brand new when it comes to North American supply. Yes. And that's a unique circumstance. That doesn't happen. It takes special circumstances for that to occur, and it's occurring right now. So, look, I think you're positioned incredibly well. I've always been a fan of the story. We've covered the story for, I think, 2.5 years now on the channel. So it's been super fun. And every time I talk to you, you've got some big piece of news. Like, it's the best thing ever when you have an entrepreneur on, and whenever you have them back on for another interview, they've done something big, you know, and it just should give investors the confidence to say, all right, this CEO does what he says he's going to do, right? And whenever we hear from him again, it's because he's got something big to talk about. So you've been busy and it's paying off. And look, I want to thank you for your time today, Hugh, getting back in front of my audience and sharing the story with me. Anything else you want to leave my audience with today before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that I've heard a lot over the last few weeks is, you know, people look at the sheer amount of things that we're doing, and they're a little bit concerned about, you know, how much investment is going to take to drive these. And I think the message that I want to, you know, give your audience today is, look, we're doing this one step at a time. We're not doing it alone. We're partnering with the right people to do it. You know, our intent is to grow fast, but to grow in a progressive way, and we are going to do it in steps. And therefore, you know, our intent is not to go out there and, you know, spend $1 billion tomorrow. Our intent is to spend a limited amount of capital, to keep our share structure very tight, the way that it is today, and to partner with people who can help us execute. And as we become more credible in the market, as we become more credible in terms of what we have to offer, we can then push the buttons, and we can ask for support from the government and a lot of different type of investment opportunities, which maybe will not give us 100% of the benefit, but that's okay, because that's how we should do it. We should partner with other people who can allow us to grow this company quickly to a large size, but with the right steps as we move forward, and make sure that everybody wins in the process, all the stakeholders, whether they are retail investors or institutional investors or government or our employees. You know, we have a very good plan, and we want to execute it on a step-by-step basis, making sure that everybody wins in the process. And there are a lot of great graphite companies out there, and I think, you know, all of them are worthy of being invested in, because graphite is the material of the future. I think what differentiates us from everybody else is, first of all, the fact that we know this industry extremely well, because most of the people on the team and there's a couple hundred of them now in the company, all come from the industry, have been in the industry for more than 10 years. And so we have, let's say, great assets, we have great know-how, great technology, great people, and now we need to execute, and we will do it in a very organized and prudent way, and that's our objective, and that's why, you know, we're taking small bites at a time rather than, you know, buying the whole of Neograph in one shot. We're buying a piece, and we're partnering with somebody to do that, and you know, that's being responsible. And that's what we want to do. We want to be responsible in our growth, but we do want to execute, and we do want to give our investors the benefit of the full package, you know, all the way from the mine down to the science of the material itself. And I think we have that. So watch this space. Looking forward to our next call.
I like it. Yeah, me too. Me too. I can't wait to see what you've cooked up next. Look, Hugh, it's a pleasure having you back on. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And I look forward to the next time.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now, if you want to take the next step, I publish a weekly newsletter and it's free. There's a link to subscribe right beneath this video, and you can join me and 50,000 other investors weekly for this exclusive content where I share my key action items and takeaways from conversations just like this and plenty others. Thanks for stopping by.